Amador Board of Supervisors, we just came out of closed session. 1A, nothing to report. 2A, direction given. 3A, 3B, 3C, denied claim. 3D, update given. And confidential minutes approved. Wouldn't mind standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Public matters not on the agenda, discussion item only. No action will be taken. Any person may address the board at this time upon any subject within the jurisdiction of Amador County Board of Supervisors. However, any matter that requires action may be referred to staff and/or committee for report and recommendation for possible action at a subsequent board meeting. Please note there's a 3-minute limit. I forgot to call you back. I apologize. Oh, I did. Okay.
Lois McDonald from Jackson. Hello. Glad to see you all here today. New California, it's a process that is going to be a wonderful thing for the state, and what we really want to do is to have people understand that there is a solution to the problems in the state. We can change this. And so today I'm going to read our 7th constitutional default. California does not do what the Constitution requires states to do. It does not give us a Republican form of government. It doesn't give us a secure border, and it doesn't give us safety on the streets when they let out tens of thousands of prisoners on the streets. And so what we're finding now is that we have a lot of what we actually have is what we're calling slavery in the state of California. That California became the 31st state in the Union on the condition that California would be a free state and not a slave state, as the secessionist South was demanding at the time that Congress approved the California Constitution on September 9th, 1850. Now in 2023, with the help and support of an enabling governor, California has not only become the world's largest slave state, but also a world power slaver. To be sure, the governor has raised numerous comments among state law enforcement officials who are concerned with what the governor does is actually enables perpetrators of human trafficking by being soft on crime measures advocated by California Democrats that hinder California's ability to combat human trafficking. Last week at a press conference, Riverside County residents and others throughout the state are suffering the consequences of soft on crime laws and policies that are proving increasingly costly and perilous to the public, according to District Attorney Mike Hestron and others who pleaded with lawmakers Wednesday to, quote, help put an end to this. The law is broken. Our system of justice has become a literal revolving door. He was joined by Sheriffs Chad Bianco, Police Chief Larry Gonzalez, and Tulare County District Attorney Tim Wood, all of whom decried what they said has become a statewide justice system favoring leniency for criminals, leaving law-abiding people exposed to greater threats and damage. I'd like to point out Epoch Times. How many of you get Epoch Times? A couple of days ago, it showed a video all about the crime, about California, why so many people are leaving California. Last year, 708 million people more left the state than came in.
708 million?
708,000 more left the state than came in. And so with all these middle-class people leaving, the jobs are going, and also the income tax revenue. You know that the difference between March 2022 and March 2023 income tax receipts for the state of California is $40 million less.
Would mind finishing up, please?
We can't survive. We need a new state. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lois.
Question? No question? Okay. I have copies of the 7th constitutional default that I will give for you guys. Hope you'll read that. And we've just really want to work on fixing our state. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, John Hopkins, General Services Director. Just briefly here, little good news, but back in 2001, 2002, on this very site, we removed an underground tank here and one at the courthouse. And at the time, I had applied through environmental health with Bob Fort's help, the underground tank cleanup fund that was available at the time. Little did I know what would ever come with that, but 2 years ago, March 12th, 2021, I received a letter from the state that said, hey, we hadn't forgot about you. And the letter even goes on to say that any changes to the claimant name or authorized signatories, which is currently in bold John Hopkins, must be approved by the fund prior to requesting reimbursement, or those lost costs may not be reimbursable. So I went through my files and I panicked a little bit because I couldn't find my files. Thank God Rebecca Marsh in my office was able to find my files for those 2 underground tanks that we removed. That file is about 7 inches thick. And she started the process of filling out all the information that the Water Resources Control Board wanted to have. So in short, last year we received a check for one of the tanks for $5,809. And last night at about 20 minutes to 5, she walks in my office and says, here's another check. It's $106,343. So 22 years later, we got $112,000 back from the state. So it's a little ironic that we're going so long with the jail project, but the state does actually move very slowly. But I'm happy to report that we have that money, less the $10,000 deductible that they took.
All I can say, Mr. Hopkins, is I knew it was bad. Didn't know it was that bad.
Thank you.
Hey, John, you don't get interest on that for
That,
20 years?
You're going right where no, we don't get any interest. They took the $10,000 deductible. I have no idea what they do with the $10,000, but I'm glad we got that, so that's good.
Pay the next guy.
Pay the next guy, right?
Any other public comment? Anybody on Zoom? Okay. Next item is approval of agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Have you decided where you're putting the addendum?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you are correct. Addendum item, we have an addendum item 1A, and I will put it to 5G.
I will say, on just a side note, I was up in Pipeline Valley Sunday, and I saw a perfect example of our being soft on crime up there. There was some real fine specimens running around the road up there. But it's, I think Ms. McDonald is quite right as far as what our leniency on crime is doing in this state. It's a huge issue. You hear stores in some big cities, they're just flat shutting down and leaving.
Supervisor Crew, were you okay with
Okay with it.
5G.
Supervisor Axe?
Yes.
Okay. Call for the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, 5-0. Supervisor Neto, do you want to?
Good.
Okay. Approval of the items on the consent agenda?
I would move the
Oh.
items on the consent agenda except item 6T.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay,
I thought you were referring to what I said earlier, so.
yeah. Second?
I'd like
Okay,
this-
all in favor of everything except for 6T, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, 5-0.
Yeah, as far as, I misunderstood your question, Chairman Brown, but yeah, the reason why earlier I asked to have item 6T pulled is I have found members have some interest in property down there, so I didn't want to vote
Hey, if
through
you
a
wouldn't
possible
mind
conflict.
stepping out for a second?
Take your deal so you can get back.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll make a
approve
motion to approve 6T from the consent agenda.
Okay. Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that is a 4-0-1. On to our regular agenda, be 5A, update on tree mortality mitigation activities by Tad Mason, a TSS consultant, and Dr. Richard Harris and Ed Struffenegger. Come on up.
Long time no see, you guys.
That's it.
Good morning.
They're all familiar faces. Even, when's the last time that we actually were here? I mean, 3 years ago?
Some
Something
crazy
like
thing.
that? No, really weird. So I'm here representing TSS, and Ed's here too, representing, he's the county RPF. You guys know us pretty well by now. Chuck, you want to just put the, okay. So I'll just walk you through this. I don't have the little clicker, so you'll be changing the slides, okay. All right, so we give you an update about every 3 months, let you know what's going on. So just next slide. So since the project began, and this is the same slide as the last update. We haven't implemented any projects since the last update. I guess it was in January. So we're still basically on the same place. We have 3 projects planned for this coming year, and we also have a permit. Chuck, did you send that permit in already? Okay.
No, not yet. We're waiting on our $8.75 check.
Yeah, so the way the BLM works is that we have to estimate the amount of material we're gonna move, and then they provide a charge for removing that material. Essentially, it's like a firewood permit, if you will. It's $8 to get that, to squeeze that out of the county. It takes a lot of effort, so Chuck's got to send the permit back in. I will say one thing about BLM. In the very beginning, we had no end of issues with the BLM folks in terms of processing our projects. This thing turned around in 1 day. I sent them the information, and in 1 day, we had the permit.
I think they have, I don't know if because of new leadership over there or if they got their process down, but that's impressive.
It was really primo. And same thing in Calaveras, 1 day, they turned the permit around. So we're good. So we've marked those trees. What we're gonna do though is we're not gonna treat them as a separate project because they're basically scattered the parcels are kind of scattered all over the place. So what we'll do is we'll include them in the other 3 projects that we have. That's kind of, sort of an addendum. We did this the last time around too. We just had some trees that were marked BLM and some trees that were just marked normally. So that we just handle them, all with the projects we already have. So next slide. Okay, so there's the BLM parcels. That's what I was trying to point out. You see those maps, all the different maps all over the place. That's where the parcels are. So they're kind of, here, there, and everywhere. And that's why instead of trying to coax a a contractor to remove, these are 77 trees on the BLM land. We don't want to have them, traveling all over the county trying to pick up those 77 trees. So we'll just include them in the projects we already have. Next slide. So the projects we have planned for this year generally follow the boundaries of our last three projects. Pioneer down Buckhorn Ridge, Pine Grove to Sutter Creek, and then Fiddletown to Shenandoah Valley. Three projects. We sent out 366 right of entry forms to the folks out there, and we've gotten back 190 to date. Now, Jeff, I know you did something on Facebook, and so, or was it Facebook or was it
That's Facebook and Nextdoor.
And Nextdoor. So we got a lot of interest from that, but unfortunately, there were people that were like, whoa, wow, you're gonna take my trees out, and it wasn't,
I put it on there exactly the way you always explain it to me, so, I got because they were assuming it was counted, private roads counted it, and I said, no, it did not count private roads.
yeah, well, we even got one yesterday that was in Sutter Creek, within the city limits. So, it's okay. I don't know that we've gotten a lot of, response to that from people who actually have the ROEs in hand. I do want to say one thing about ROEs because, people over in West Point are a strange breed. But they do respond to this kind of thing. And so I heard from a lady over there who's kind of a local activist. She said she did not like the ROE saying that we were granting access essentially to any representative of the state government, right? Including CAL FIRE con crews. She felt that we invite the con crews onto property, they case the joint, come back after they're out, and there's a big deal like that. So she said that a lot of people were not turning these in because they were afraid of the security risk that was posed. Now that was really interesting. In our very first project, we had the con crews come out and clear, was it Joyce Road? Yeah, clear, they did a fire break along Joyce Road. And essentially they followed in our tracks and created a fire break. We never had occasion to use them again. I don't know what that means. I mean, I don't know what's in the people's minds when they see these things, whether they just, just don't want anybody else on their property, So anyway, we'll see. We got 190, that's good enough to go. And we'll get some more as we go along, because I think as people see what's happening on a property next door, all of a sudden they remember, hey, I got one of these forums. I better call these guys and see if I can get into the project. And when we do that, we treat them as add-ons, and we have John allows us 20% overrun on our budgets, so we can add those properties in as they come in. And, we'll just going the way we're gonna go.
Dr. Harris, question on those, the ones that haven't been returned. Would it be possible, could you maybe, send the supervisors the names that aren't returning right of entry forms in their districts? Or maybe, that'd be nice if you could separate them, but also maybe even the whole list. I wouldn't mind if one of the supervisors knows somebody in my district or a number of people and call them and said, hey, we've got this program, you might want to take advantage of it. Because sometimes if people call personally that they know and say it's a good program, help us help you and help us. Sometimes
I can
people
do that. I can't divide them up by district because I don't know how the district boundaries would correspond to our project boundaries,
Just give us a list.
I can give you, what I'll do is I'll send Chuck a list of all the non-returns for all the projects, and then you guys can scan that. One of the things, we'd love to be able to call these people or, kind of try to convince them, or something. We walk up and knock on the doors sometimes, and we get ROEs that way, but, lots of folks don't live here.
Right.
Or they're not home when we're there. So that's a great idea. I'll send a list to you, Chuck, and then you can distribute it to the soups.
Sounds good.
Okay, next slide. Okay, so interestingly enough, we've just had probably one of the most significant winters on record, right? And so my perception on this is that, is this a reversal of the drought? Well, we'll see. You know, next year, who knows? I mean, we had, I think, a couple of years back, we had a really good rainfall year, and the drought came right back and hit us even harder. So we'll see, but we're still seeing mortality, not so much as we used to see. I mean, the bark beetle epidemic, if you will, maybe, you know, is kind of tapering off a little bit. And we're still seeing patches of dead ponderosa pine, but mostly what we're seeing is mortality in other species, like incense cedar, madrone, and then at the higher elevations, the true firs. I mean, there are tons of dead trees up there around Silver Lake and Bear River. So it's still happening. Whether we're going to see something change this summer, not so much mortality, you know, this summer showing up, we'll see. One thing that is good, in my view, is that we've had, this year was the first time in several years we had a hard freeze for several days. And the hard freeze is what kills the beetles in the trees. So I think they say like 5 days of hard freeze can really knock back the beetle populations. So we'll see what happens this summer. And, but like I say, we still have a lot going on at the higher elevations.
Other than the amount of rain that we received, is there any reason why we lost from just tipping over cedar trees?
You mean from wind throw?
Yeah, from this last winter, you know,
We had a lot of wind throw.
yeah.
We had some really heavy wind events. I mean, I think they, at Kirkwood, didn't they record wind up to 100 miles?
Oh, well, Kirkwood always gets the good wind.
Yeah, but I know, we had them, I mean, we drive around the county, we see downed trees everywhere.
Right.
You know, and I'm sure the county road crews are well aware of that. Sometimes we come up on somebody who's out there with a chainsaw.
I mean, what I'm trying to get at is that were the roots not, for the cedar trees, being able to handle, you know,
They don't have a taproot.
oh, okay.
They don't have a what?
A pine tree, like a firs, have taproots. And cedar trees, kind of like a redwood, it's got a big wide root. When the ground gets real soft, they're not anchored.
The combination of saturated soils, super saturated soils, really.
Right.
And then those high winds is what causes a lot of those wind throws, especially in the gray pine as well. We saw a lot of gray pines go down. Okay, next slide.
Just real quick, Richard, so these cedars and firs that are dying, that's not due to beetles, that's probably just due to drought?
And, you know, in the last slide, I was saying that some of these, we just don't know the causes. In some cases, I mean,
Do the beetles attack those species?
there's different beetles.
Oh,
Like
okay.
for the firs, there's the fir engraver beetle.
Okay.
But for the cedar, there's no insect. You know, there's no, apparent reason. I mean, we've heard from people at the Forest Service that prolonged drought has caused xylem tissues, which conduct water in the trees, to collapse, so that even when the water is available, because the cells have collapsed, they're not able to transmit the water.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's all kind of, it's a complex thing. Disease, insects, drought, physiological responses to drought. I mean, it's not as simple as just a beetle hitting a tree. I mean, it's much more complex over the years. It's gotten more complex over the years. Initially, everybody thought, well, it's the beetles. Well, it's not just the beetles. So you guys know about the Good Neighbor Authority project? I mean, I think we covered it the last time.
Yep.
You know, that's been signed, that's in effect, and what that'll do is that'll reimburse the county for what they are not reimbursed by Cal OES for removing dead trees off Forest Service ground. So Ed and I, last week, we met with the new district ranger, her name, Linda Helm. She's the new district ranger. She came from Michigan, so she's definitely going to be getting her feet wet for a while here, trying to learn about California, I think. But luckily, she's got some good people on her side And when we met with her, she had, one of her staff people there who knows us well and who knows what we've been doing. So I think, things will go smoothly when we actually get a project together, but it's gonna be a while, because I think there's 10 feet of snow up there at, up in Bear River and especially at Silver Lake. So we can't go in there and mark trees until we can get access. And I don't even think the road's been plowed, right?
Normally have it open at Memorial Day.
Yeah, I mean, Memorial Day weekend, we can go in there with our snowshoes, right? But I don't think we're gonna be marking trees out there for a while, and I expect that when we do mark the trees, we might not be able to get the work done before, we're shut down for winter again.
I suspect somebody's gonna be playing in the snow this July up at Kirkwood myself, so.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So that's the way it's gonna be. So the other thing about the Good Neighbor Authority project is what we have now is we have the Good Neighbor Authority agreement, and then we have what's called the supplemental project agreement, and that covers the tree hazard program. There may be in the future additional, project agreements to do other things like fuel treatments along county roads, to try to create fuel breaks. So it's a good thing, it's in place and it's not gonna go away. All that needs to happen is money needs to be funneled into it. And if things go the way they have been in other places, I think the Forest Service is kind of rolling in dough a little bit right now because of the infrastructure bill. So I think that they are allocating money towards fuels treatments. So we'll see what happens. I think that's about it. And I hope I haven't taken too much time. Oh, yeah, just to show you, where Silver Lake is, where Bear River is, but that's where the Forest Service projects are gonna be. So that's about it. And hopefully we'll be able to implement these projects and continue a successful relationship. I mean, it's been great. I mean, 6 years, I think, right? Yeah. 6 years? Yeah, and we're still here. I mean, it's amazing. So any questions?
Nope, I think that's it.
You good?
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
On to 5B, General Services Administration and Energy Conservation Project presentation by Sierra Business Council and the county's Emergency Energy Services Company.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, John Hopkins, General Services Director. I had put together a team to analyze our actual value of savings regarding our solar projects and the HVAC replacement and lighting replacement that we did here a couple of years ago that we started. In the midst of that, we also were contacted by Sierra Business Council regarding a fellowship program, and Tallulah, I believe, is online right now, Lloyd, who will go through this presentation along with Jessica Ritter with SiteLogic and the staff that I had assigned to this, which was Karen Warburton, Mark Oliveria, and Jeff White. So I'll let them do their presentation. It was a little complex, though, to go through the PG&E information, as you can imagine. Very complex to understand all that, but their job was to understand that, put it into somewhat of a concise report, and actually let us know where we're at with that savings. So with that, I will bring Jessica and Karen can come up and start with Tallulah.
Chairman, members of the board, thank you so much for letting us come and present this project. We've got Tallulah from Sierra Business Council. She's got a PowerPoint presentation ready for you all. And then Karen and I are here to answer any questions that you may have. And then we're going to go, at the very end, we'll look at a new cash flow scenario with your actual realized savings.
All right, should I get started?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Good morning, Chairman Brown and Supervisors. So, as they mentioned, I'm Tallulah, and I'm a Civics Fellow, and I've been working with at Sierra Business Council. And I've been working with Amador County for the past few months to analyze your solar installation, HVAC, and lighting replacements. So essentially, I've been trying to figure out if this project is saving you money, and if so, how much. So here's some background information. So the cost of electricity has been rising, and this is especially true in California and other Western states. Renewable energy is now cheaper than fossil fuels. Therefore, Amador County installed solar panels through SiteLogic at 5 locations. The solar panels began to produce energy at the end of 2021 and beginning of 2022, and HVAC and lighting replacements were installed around the same time. So we'll come back to this project in a bit, but first I want to briefly explain how PG&E calculates the price you pay on those utility bills. Next slide. So the way PG&E organizes these bills is quite complicated, and this is especially true for non-residential buildings and buildings with solar, and many of Amador County's buildings are both. So I won't go into all the details, but I'll just give you some key concepts. Demand charges are one of them. Only non-residential buildings get demand charges, and they are based on the highest 15-minute interval of electricity usage for a meter each month. So as you can see in this bill, the demand charge makes up most of it, actually. This is because this building has solar, so it generally isn't using large amounts of energy from the grid. However, it's still consuming a lot of energy for short periods when the solar panels aren't producing much power. So 15 minutes of high energy usage from the grid determines this demand charge, and it can be quite large. Next slide. There's also a few concepts that are specific to buildings with solar. Net energy metering is a system that provides credits to customers with solar panels. In this system, customers only pay for the energy they consume from the grid minus the amount they send to the grid because they produce it with their solar panels. And this is shown in that equation that you can see on the slide. The difference between these amounts can be paid for in a yearly bill called a true-up bill. Some buildings with solar have these true-up bills, but others just pay this difference on a monthly basis, and this depends on the type of building we're looking at. Multiple meters can also be aggregated. This means that solar energy produced at one meter can be shared with nearby meters and even nearby buildings. And Amador County has many facilities on this plan. Next slide. So now I'll show you some data from Amador County's buildings, which I analyzed. So this is the museum, and I'm showing graphs from buildings without solar as well so that we can compare them to those with solar. The graph on the left shows electricity usage over a 3-year period, and it's useful for seeing trends in energy consumption over time. The graph on the right shows time of use and cost trends for that same period. And time of use data splits up usage by time of day. And this is important since electricity costs different amounts during different times of day. Next slide. So I'll just scroll through these quickly. They're just for your information, and you can let me know if you have any questions about them. This is a probation office. Next slide. Health and Human Services building. Next slide. The airport.
Could I stop you just a sec? So
Yes.
the dotted line is the actual cost if you were to buy the I guess I'm not understanding.
Yeah, so that dotted line is the cost that you are paying for each per month on electricity bills for each building. And then under it is the amount of electricity being used at different times of day. So the costs are shown like on the right axis gives that information, and then the electricity usage is on the left side. Does that make sense?
Okay, so is there a way to determine the cost savings from this, or I guess?
We're getting to that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Never mind.
Yeah, this is just general data on all the buildings. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Next slide, please. So here's the first building with solar, and that yellow line on the left graph is showing electricity produced by the solar, and the purple is PG&E electricity. And the graph on the right is the same as the ones we saw in the previous slides. And it's only showing electricity from PG&E because this is what's included in how much you're paying per month.
Question on the graph on the left. You've got like the pink, and then you got kind of like the the cream color. Is that reflecting that the cream color is basically taking the place of all the PG&E electricity use, or is that both combined, so it's still using some PG&E power besides the solar?
Yeah, the cream yellow one that's just produced in your solar panel.
Yeah, but is that taking the place of all the purple that's below it, or is that in addition to purple as far as usage?
It's in addition. So everything, the yellow part is from solar, and then the purple part is from PG&E. Yeah.
But there's still a net reduction of PG&E power that's being bought, correct?
Yes. Yeah, that's what we're seeing.
All right, thank you. I think that's what you were asking, Supervisor?
Yeah, so the cream is what color reflects what's the reduction.
Yeah, well, the cream is like probably during the day and the purple is at night or something like that.
Yeah, the reduction can be seen in the graph on the right. Do you want to, Tallulah, do you want to explain the graph on the right?
Sure. That's showing electricity usage from PG&E. So it's not including solar. And you can see it drops. And that arrow is where solar is installed. So you can see that electricity from PG&E drops and costs are also dropping at that point. Yeah. Next slide, unless you have any more questions about this one. All right. This is from the General Services building. This one thing that's interesting about this one is there's actually that section that looks like negative electricity usage. And this is because during those months, the building is actually producing more electricity than it's using from the grid. So the net amount of net energy is being sent to the grid from the solar panels instead of the building taking more energy from the grid. So that's why it shows up as negative. And the graph on the right is still showing those costs. Next slide.
Question on that, as far as the negative, what shows is the negative usage. Does the county get a credit on that towards other buildings? I remember it did, didn't it?
Can we go back one slide?
Oh, yeah. I believe it gets credit, but just for this building. Is that correct, Karen?
Yes.
So what we're seeing in the dashed line is the cost. So you're seeing the cost is above the zero line there. So we are still paying in this situation.
Supervisors, what we have is the county solar was put in place under the NEEM 2 program. So when we do overproduce, it's a kilowatt credit. So for every kilowatt hour that we overproduce, it kind of goes into a bank, right? So it's a PG&E energy bank, if you will, and we get a credit per credit, a one-to-one credit for that, right? Under the NEEM 3 program, which is in place now, we would only get 25% of that value for that kilowatt hour. Under the program we're under, if we overproduce there at GSA by 100 kilowatt hours in a week, we get 100 kilowatt hours in the bank. We'll use that power when we're drawn from PG&E.
But we don't get credit for any electricity we produce beyond what we use, correct?
We do.
Is that the same with residential homeowners too?
Yeah. Depending on what NEM program you're under, right? So the net energy metering program, if, for example, you installed solar at your home some time ago, then you're probably under either a NEM 1 or a NEM 2 scenario, in which case you will get a one-to-one credit for overproduced energy. And you'll use that credit, say when the sun goes down and your solar's not producing, but you're still pulling electricity from the grid. You'll use up those credits until they're gone, then you'll start purchasing power from the
But
grid.
it's just 1-to-1. You don't get paid for any overproduction.
It's very unlikely, but sometimes if you have a small home and a lot of solar, then yes, PG&E will cut you a check at the end of the year. But usually that doesn't happen in a commercial type setting like this.
Right. If we do overproduce at the end of the year at true-up time, as long as that site is not aggregating meters, we will get paid for that. But here at CAC, we are aggregating meters. We're spreading it across a couple facilities, which Tallulah will show you. But at sites where we're not aggregating, we would get paid if we did overproduce for the whole year term.
Next slide. We're ready. So this is from the landfill. Next slide. This is the animal control. You can see there is that big spike at the end, which is a true-up bill. Next slide. This is the administration center. Next slide. And the administration center's solar is connected to the district attorney's office. So that's why electricity usage is going negative, but we're not seeing any solar on the graph. It's because it's receiving solar from the administration center. Next slide. And that's also true for the sheriff's office.
Is that why the administrative center, the graph, the tan is so big compared to PG&E's? You know, if you were buying it directly from PG&E, is that why it just spiked up, because that extra power is going to the district attorney's office?
Yeah, because, well, like the administration center is producing a lot of solar, and that's why it can be shared among other buildings.
Okay, so it is, it's just producing a lot of, okay, so that's just production, that's not actual use.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Next slide. So now we're getting to that big question of, are the solar panels and energy efficiency upgrades saving the county money? And in order to answer this, we need to find out how much money the county would have spent in 2022 without these upgrades, if it were just getting all this energy from PG&E. Next slide. So in order to do this, we are multiplying the amount of solar electricity produced by PG&E's cost per kilowatt hour. And this is telling us how much you would have spent if you purchased that electricity from PG&E. Then we're also adding the savings from those energy efficiency upgrades, which are the lighting and HVAC. And we need to subtract the costs of those projects, obviously. And this should give us the total savings over the past year. Next slide. So in order to do this calculation, we need to find the average cost per kilowatt hour. And this is actually not super simple because there's different costs at different times of day, like I mentioned. And so the estimate that SiteLogic uses is 15.9 cents per kilowatt hour. And this is intentionally low. And this is based on the idea of under-promising and over-delivering. So if you under-promise how much you're going to save people, then you can provide them with more savings than that in the end. And our estimate is 33.2 cents, which is quite a bit higher. And I got this number from finding the average cost per kilowatt hour in 2022 from Amador County's buildings that don't have solar, because those are a nice similar situation, except they just didn't have solar installed. And this is actually a pretty standard number across California and across the grid. Next slide. So we need to do these calculations now. So solar production in 2022 was over 1.1 million kilowatt hours. And we multiply this by that cost per kilowatt hour of 33.2 cents. And so then from this, we find that over $375,000 were saved on PG&E's bills. And then we also want to add the savings from the lighting and HVAC. And this is based on estimates of how much less energy the buildings are using because they have these more efficient systems. And so we find $435,000 of total savings. But we still need to subtract the cost of the project. Next slide. So here are project costs, the CEC loan, OBF loan, and SiteLogic maintenance. And so you can see these numbers here for those. And now I'll pass it over to Jessica, and she'll put this all together and show you the cash flow for the project.
Thank you, Tallulah. My voice is pretty loud, so I don't want this to be too close. Let's see. So if you remember, supervisors, and I think it was exact same crowd here back in 2020, when we first started developing this project, you may recognize this cash flow scenario that we're going to pull up on the screen. We used a very similar template, same project cost numbers, but we're going to show you what your actual cash flow scenario looks like now with the updated savings numbers from Tallulah. Perfect. Okay. So it was some time ago, but you might remember a cash flow pro forma that looked something like this. So first we're going to go down here to the inputs here, and I want to focus on these numbers down here. Let's see if we can make them a little bit bigger. Let's look at this. Okay, so looking at the base project cost, the total investment from the county for this lighting, HVAC, and solar project was $3,460,643. We were able to fund this project in two ways, using two separate programs. The first program was for $3 million. This was through the California Energy Commission's Energy Conservation Assistance Act program. It's a 1% loan program. It's a very good interest rate there. It is financed over 18 years. And we were able to fund the solar and the HVAC with this program. The remaining $460,643 was funded through PG&E's 0% on-bill financing program. This is mainly for lighting projects, and that's exactly what we use it for here with the county. So all of the LED lighting that was replaced throughout the county was funded by this 0% program. So total $3.4 million. We used a 5% utility escalation rate in this cash flow, which is very conservative. Typically, PG&E is escalating their rates annually at much higher than 5%, but for the purpose of this cash flow, we always want to be conservative. Like Tallulah mentioned, we want to under-promise and over-deliver. The new savings number, which Tallulah showed you the math and how she got to the new savings number, roughly the amount of kilowatt hours that you're producing with your solar, times the current cost for electricity, if you were to buy that from the grid, from PG&E, is $435,273. Your annual operation and maintenance program cost, and SiteLogic is the company that's doing the operation and maintenance, is $23,853 per year.
You know, question on that. That's figuring current electric prices, time of use prices. Could there be an issue down the road, maybe if you get more and more solar, where like the on-peak prices may actually turn into as far as actual dollars, the off-peak type price, or you might see solar get a lot cheaper?
Do you mean
power
energy?
get a lot cheaper during the prime solar time period?
So, I mean, let's think about if we were PG&E. You know, if you were PG&E, would you do that, right? The answer is probably no, because it's very expensive for PG&E to produce this power, right? So when you have summertime events, especially when solar is the most productive during the summer, we have more hours of sunshine, it's producing more kilowatt hours. It's also very expensive for PG&E to ramp up their grid to accommodate all the HVAC loads from everybody's homes and buildings such as this. So I don't anticipate, we don't, in the industry, don't anticipate power getting cheaper during those times. Because PG&E is it's costing them more to backfill the grid with energy to be produced for all of you guys to use, for all of us to use. But that's an interesting question. If it was an issue, I think the solar industry would be shaking in their boots a little bit, but doesn't seem to be the case yet.
Yeah, I wonder about that.
Yeah. Great. So going back up to the cash flow, let's make this a little clearer for you all. Okay, so everything in these red columns is going to be outgoing cost for the county. So your annual ECA loan payment, that's the 1% program to the CEC, $178,001 every single year. This is actually divided into 2 payments throughout the year, so 178 split in half, twice a year. Your annual OBF loan payment, this is only for 9 years. And then of course, your annual solar O&M service and energy dashboard cost here. So $23,000 escalates 3% annually. Everybody following the cash flow so far? Okay. In the green is your gross annual project savings. So now this is the number that Tallulah gave us. So we started this in 2022. You can see the years over here when your solar went online. Every solar array came online at different times of the year. So we only gave you about a half a year's savings in 2022, but 2023, you're gonna receive that full year savings there. And so all of this savings is where we take out everything in red, right? All of these savings is how you pay all of these red columns. And then what you're left over is in blue. This is your net savings. God bless you.
Excuse me.
On an annual basis and a cumulative basis.
Could you zoom in on those a little bit so I can see the numbers better?
Is that better?
Okay, so we're looking at 200,000, maybe a little bit more. You know, climbing up to 300,000.
Correct. And it climbs with utility cost escalation.
Okay, so that's all based on those estimates. So it actually climbs eventually in year, I don't know, 12 or 15 to $1 million. Okay.
Yeah. Yep, it's pretty significant. So, and keep in mind that we only used a 5% utility escalation rate on here, so your actual numbers are gonna be a lot higher than this as PG&E increases the cost of energy. As Tallulah mentioned, we used a 15 cents per kilowatt hour estimation back in 2020 when we were first designing this project for the county. It was intentionally low, but the actual rates were around 20 to 22 cents per kilowatt hour. Now you can see a few years later, they're up to 33 cents per kilowatt hour. So if that gives you any indication on how PG&E is steadily increasing their rates, that's a very good example. And we're anticipating that to continue, especially with all of the forest fires and bankruptcies, and PG&E is having to dig themselves out of that hole. And the way they do that is by passing along rate increases to ratepayers. All right. So this is your new cash flow pro forma. We are happy to come back on an annual basis and update this spreadsheet for you. SiteLogic is here as your operation and maintenance provider, as well as your energy management service provider. The county does have an interactive dashboard that shows all of your projects. It shows the production from all of your solar arrays. It also shows the usage from each of your facilities, what that costs you in actual dollars and in kilowatt hours.
Just one more question before you go. So like the 2023, that's a hard number, so that's actual savings. So it's about 200,000. And that
2022, sorry.
Or 2022, okay. So we're kind of in the 200,000 range for sure. The rest are just kind of estimations, okay.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
So it was a good deal putting the solar in and making the other upgrades.
I think that's essentially the case here. And it was actually very helpful to have Tallulah with Sierra Business Council come in and do her third-party evaluation. I think it was a smart move on the county. Of course, we're going to tell you all the facts, but we're also the company that designed and built it, right? So to have a third-party organization come in and actually do the deep dive, look through every single one of your PG&E bills, do the math and come up with these numbers, I think was a very intelligent move on the county's part, on John's part for sure. And yeah, turned out to be a very good project for you guys.
Don't give them any bigger head.
I know.
I do. So, members of the board, do you have any questions for this team right now? Technical questions. If not, I'm going to try to wrap this up. You good to wrap it up? So, with what Jessica's talking about, there's actually even a greater benefits here that I want to point out. Not only am I very appreciative to Tallulah, thank you, Tallulah. I know you're not here, wish you were, but thank you very much. To Jessica Ritter and our team, Mark, Jeff, and Karen, who dove into a lot of complex information, and it is complex. But to remind the board that we also retrofitted all of our lighting, that's all paid for. We also got a lot of HVAC equipment replaced that we could not have afforded, right? Just out of the general fund. That's all built into this that we have now that's new, that's on a 10-year path, maybe 15-year path before we even have to start thinking about replacing that equipment. So it's paying for all of our debt services. It bought us new equipment, new lighting, and we're still saving money. I couldn't be happier. So hopefully you're pleased with that. And as Jessica said, they'll come back on an annual basis if you want. I think maybe every 2 or 3 years would be fine. So we don't go through this long exercise if you're amenable to that. But I wanted that actual cost, and we actually got it. We had to go through one full cycle before we had it. And that's what's been represented to you here today. Any questions?
Yeah, I have one question. I come in here on weekends sometimes, come in here on nights sometimes, and I know some lights are left on for security reasons, but we have a lot of lights left on sometimes, and to me, wouldn't that cause more savings if we had more lights shut off and more energy to be banked?
So you want to take that 195, 367, and maybe 196, 367? Okay.
We can
We'll
make
look
it
into
another couple thousand or $5,000, why not?
Yeah, we'll look into that. It's on a, God, I don't have staff here, but energy program that we'll look at to see if we can.
VAV system.
It's hard sometimes to program those things and get them all dialed in, but we'll take a look at it. Yeah.
Anybody from the public like to comment? Anybody on Zoom? Well, John, thank you for running this. Jeff, Karen?
Yeah, the whole team.
Yeah, yeah,
Well done.
thank you. Tallulah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are on to 5C, stipulation of value, correction of leak ion holdings, stipulation for reduction of assessment application presented to the Board of Equalization, 13123, listed an incorrect 2014 secured roll current value of 24,552,530. The correct 2014 secured rolled value should be 7,563,300 due to the roll correction was processed.
I have a question for council. Why is this coming to this board, not the Board of Equalization? I mean, essentially, we're the same, but this is not a Board of Equalization meeting.
The statute requires certain adjustments to be approved by the Board of Supervisors. I think that's why this comes to.
We approved this at a Board of Equalization meeting, correct? Yeah.
Yes.
Like in January,
Yes.
right? Okay. So we kind of went through all the arguments and the reasoning behind this modification, which seems significant. Okay.
I'd like our assessor staff to come up. I have at least one question.
Hi, I'm Sammy Milburn from the Assessor's Office, Admin Supervisor.
Go ahead and bring the mic down to you a little bit.
Sorry, okay.
Good morning. One question, and I read through this whole thing, I didn't mark it, but there's one party that has not agreed to the change in assessment, so what happens if they don't agree?
I believe you're talking about,
Can you go right, speak right into the mic?
I think you're talking about the one, the attorney was unable to reach the other party, and she didn't want to attend.
Right.
So they said that no matter what, it would just be concluded. So
Well,
if
but
she
she-
didn't accept it, I guess there's more than one party?
But the attorney no longer represents her, so it seems like she would still have to agree to it at some point.
If that's the case, I would refer that to Jim, probably. We were here just on the fact that the correction was being made and decreased. So I don't know the ins and outs of that particular part of this.
I think that was discussed at the BOE hearing, and ultimately, I think the adjustment was ordered, and so it bound her whether she was there or not.
Miss Bridget Lamonte, manager trustee of the Heritage Equity Trust.
Yeah, it will, this will encompass her as well.
So she
He
can't.
couldn't get a hold of her, right?
Yeah, but she didn't, but they tried and weren't,
She has not challenged it to date.
well, she would have had to be at the hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Is her whereabouts known?
I think they knew, but she wouldn't respond even when they tried to find her, but.
Supervisors, anything else? Anybody from the public? Zoom?
I think it did say in the documentation, though, that going forward, the assessment is set, but it can be increased if the new company, U.S. Mine, increases production or has more. Basically, it's going to involve their purchase of more equipment newer equipment to process, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, are you ready for a motion?
Yes, I am.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the stipulation for reduction of the assessment that was originally presented at the Board of Equalization meeting on January 31st, 2023. That listed the incorrect 2014 secured roll at roughly 24 million down to 7.5 million.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, on to 5D, review of the budget for landfill improvement and waste management. As the solid waste director will be out of the office for the week of the budget workshop, these budgets will come back to the board for approval with recommended budget in June.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Morning.
I apologize for not being here the first week of May, and I thank you for allowing me to do this during this meeting. Would you like to start with 1820 or 4400? It lists 1820 first, but then the attachments were 4400, so.
Doesn't matter.
Okay, let's go with 1820. That's our landfill improvement project fund, which we are currently in the process of maybe trying to get changed to a enterprise fund if everyone will agree to that ultimately, and so we can get that financing going for our projects. The state has a issue with a project fund versus an enterprise fund because their contract says one thing and they're only willing to go with one thing only. But anyways, so in our 1820 fund, I have adjusted the revenue down a little bit this year. Since COVID is over, we have less, it appears that we have a little less traffic going to the landfills. So our revenues aren't exactly at where we thought they would be, a little bit lower. But we also have included in 1820 a reimbursement for FEMA reimbursement for the funds we're expending now to haul the water. Ultimately, when we get the projects done, we hopefully will never have to haul water again, but we don't have the projects done, so because of the rains this year, we're in the process of hauling water. The next agenda item will be to look into that a little further. We have more water to haul still. But we anticipate hopefully getting that money back. The money we have spent out of this fund so far, we have spent on a PLC, which is a programmable logic computer, which runs our flare system. That was the year before. That was the one tangible thing we spent out of our money in here. And the other thing we spent money on was our Eco Mystery Evaporator, our new evaporator, which is up and running again. And that money will ultimately get reimbursed when we get the financing for the projects. So that will come back to us. We have about $240,000 in revenue projected, plus the $50,000 reimbursement from the federal money, OES, FEMA money, for about $290,000. We ultimately will be budgeting that year after year for, first of all, debt service on our projects when we get those started and going and finished. And then secondly, any additional money will be used for capital improvements that are needed out there on that site. So that's what we spend the money on for that project fund.
No question on that evaporator compressor.
Mhm.
There's a controller upgrade. Isn't that a pretty new unit?
Our evaporator,
Yeah,
it's brand new.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what was that upgrade as part of when we bought it then?
Right,
Not
well, the
additional.
PLC was actually for the compressor for the flare. So what the PLC has allowed us to do is to bring the flare operation online so we can monitor it 24/7. If it goes down, previously what would happen if it went down, we only knew that if we went out there and were on site. Now, if the compressor goes off or the flare goes off, we get an automatic warning via a text message on our phone and an email. I have access to it, and SCS, our monitoring group, has access to that. So I don't try to get involved in the monitoring of it or the running of it. So the protocol is if we get one of those alerts, the SCS guy goes in and tries to restart the system. If the system doesn't restart, he'll call me and say, it's not working, can you go out there and have a look? Typically what happens if it's not working is one of the blowers has gone out. In the last 2 months, we've lost 2 blower belts, so both the blowers are down currently right now. We have replaced the belts, but there appears to be some other type of electrical issues, so we're trying to get somebody on site to fix that. Or the compressor has gone out. There's a number of reasons why the compressor goes out. The belt breaks, we had a motor go down. There's a drainage unit that's gone out. But we go out, troubleshoot that, fire it all back up, and then it gets going again. Then we're back online. We can see what's going on with the flare at all times. And in addition to being able to run the flare off-site and be able to manage it off-site, we also get information provided on runtime, the amount of gas that's going through it, the strength of the gas that's going through it, that kind of thing, all of which enhances our reporting capabilities. And it's stuff that we used to have to develop manually. Now it's all done automatically for us.
Thank you.
Say, Jeff?
Yes.
This has to do with the evaporator, but in that leachate pond, are there volatile organics that end up in there?
There are not. There's an excessive amount of magnesium and iron.
Okay, well, that won't evaporate.
But there are no VOCs in the leachate
So
water.
if there was, would we be able to use this evaporator thing, or?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, as long as we're not, the way the evaporator is designed is it puts the droplets out in the air, and any constituents that are in it fall back down into the pond, and just the water evaporates off. But VOCs would have obviously
Probably
evaporate off too. I don't think there's an issue with that.
Okay.
Because we have VOCs that are we do monitor for methane and stuff like that, both at the ground level and for all the wells we got. And we do have some VOCs in the groundwater at that extraction trench. That's one of the issues we have down there. But I don't believe it would be an issue if they were being evaporated off into the air.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this?
So that's 1820. We have a $290,000 budget in the CIP funds. We budget 100% of that's a policy, county policy. We budget 100% of the revenue as expenditures. Whether or not we actually spend that next year, we don't have any projects at this time that I'm anticipating, but the money is available to do stuff as it comes up out there. There's plenty of things that could be done out there. We would bring those back to the board in the event that we're going to do them, but at this time, there's nothing planned.
Okay, on to 4,400.
4,400. So again, we're asking for a little bit more backfill, and the reason for a little bit more backfill is because I've reduced the revenue estimates for the year. And that's essentially based on the historical change from over the last couple of years. It's gone down a little bit, hasn't gone up. I do budget conservatively. ACES will probably come back for a rate increase. They seem to be doing that, and inflation seems to be pointing in that direction. So our numbers probably will actually go up from what I'm anticipating, but conservatively, I don't budget that. So on the expenditure side, the only really thing that's changed is we have this in our new WDRs. The state's requiring us to do some additional monitoring, not only at the groundwater trench and the semi-annual ones, but they're also asking for quarterly monitoring or semi-annual monitoring on all of the extraction wells on waste unit 1 and 2 and 3. So that's causing us some additional heartburn in terms of cost for the chemical analysis, which is probably going to add about $10,000 or $20,000 a year to our cost. Other than that, everything else, no significant anticipated changes for the year. We are asking for a contribution from the general fund of approximately $40,000. I anticipate it will probably ultimately be less than that. It may even be a wash at the end if we can realize some savings during the year. But for budget purposes, that's what we're asking.
Chuck, do you see any problems with this?
That's been included in
our budget?
Our budget, yes.
Okay.
But that's an overall increase of only about 30,000 compared to.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
To the public, anything to say? Anybody on Zoom? Back to the board. Any questions or motion?
You don't need to approve by motion, you just need to direct staff.
Okay.
And, because this will come back as part of the overall budget.
Okay.
This is what we'll be doing all day on May 8th. We'll have the budget workshop where we go department by department and put the budgets together. They will all come back for approval of the recommended budget in June. Probably June 9th is what we're aiming for, and that's where we are. The Public Works budget will be reviewed at the regular board meeting, at the next regular board meeting on May 9th. So just like we're doing landfill right now.
Keep doing a good job. Thank you, Mr. Gardner.
Thank you, sir.
I appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
Okay, we're on to 5E. Board ratification of emergency expenditures of Class 2 leachate pond water hauling, suggested action. It's approved per recommendation.
So, as of February 2nd, we reached our freeboard level, and we had to start hauling water. I noticed my attachment A was double-sided in my packet, so you didn't get the first page that showed the email from the state board saying we need to start hauling water. That was one of the things I gave you that was on your desk when you got here. You had the second page of the email, but you didn't have the first page with the pertinent information on it. The other thing I gave you was a copy of the contract from Regional Sand, which is where we haul that water to, showing what the cost was and what the anticipation was and what they allocated. We initially put in for 270,000 in volume in terms of gallons. In talking to the woman who does the permitting, I bumped that up to 600,000 gallons. That looks like it's going to be more like about 1.1 million by the time we get through. Again, we're anticipating, hopefully, through the FEMA process, that all of the money we're spending on this, which is strictly hauling charges, costs us $720,000 per 6,000 gallons of water to haul it over to Elk Grove. We were at, when the PO was expanded and approved for the information that I brought you here, we had hauled 111 loads or 666,000 gallons of water. Since then, we've hauled another 156,000 gallons of water. The water level in the pond has not gone down, it's actually gone up some. We have not been able to run the evaporator as much as we want. Two reasons for that. One, cold weather and rain. If you don't get, nothing evaporates if it's cold enough and wet enough. So there's no purpose in running the evaporator during that. We did have a little incident when we first got the evaporator, and the first weekend we ran it, we blew the pump. That's been replaced. They paid for it. We don't understand why that happened. So I'm a little hesitant to run that thing on automatic now. We've just been running it as the guy from SCS is out there on a weekly basis. But as the weather warms up, it's supposed to be 90, I guess, by Thursday. We're going to start running that thing more often. We're also, as Brian called me yesterday and asked, is there a way we could maybe not haul water and just evaporate the water off? I'm gonna write to the enforcement group, Paul Sanders at the state, and make that suggestion to him and see if he'll go along with that. Typically, they don't like to do stuff like that, but I think they may allow us to do it. We'll have to see.
But the water hauling potentially could be reimbursed from
Through,
FEMA?
yeah, through the FEMA process, because technically, I mean, it was a result of the storms we got. I mean, we're doing the pond is not big enough for the water balance we have out there. And if we get rain this year, back in 17, I think we had another big rain year. You know, we hauled over 1 million gallons that year. We're gonna haul over 1 million, probably over 1 million gallons this year. When we do increase the pond size, we'll be able to handle all this. Then it will just be a process of evaporating that water off over time during the summer. So we won't get hit with the hauling charges. We will have more water to haul. We may eventually have to get another evaporator out there if we got 2 million gallons of water in the pond, because technically the WDR state, we need to have the pond emptied by the 1st of October. Whatever the size of the pond is, it still needs to be low enough to be able to handle the expected amount of water in a 1,000-year event, which would be if, you know, a storm came and sat over us like it did down in Florida, and they got 24 hours of rain in a day. I did some analysis, and Placerville got about 49 inches of rain this year. Sonora got about 48 inches of rain this year. Our Buena Vista landfill site only got 30 inches of rain. That's 30 miles either side of us. They got almost 20 inches more rain. So we sort of lucked out. We would have been on the news probably if we'd gotten that additional 20 inches of rain, because we wouldn't have been able to handle that. We couldn't have hauled it fast enough. I mean, it just wouldn't have happened, so.
Does it make sense, or is there a way to put a cover?
You know, they do have covers. When you talk to the people that monitor these sites, some of them do have. It's really expensive to put a cover over it. And
You'd have to take it off during the summer.
yeah, it would probably be some kind. It would probably have to. Yeah, I don't think it would be a flexible type cover. I think it might be some kind of a hard structure. You know, when you get big, like that's typically what they say they put over them, sort of an aluminum type thing. You know, then it's gotta be earthquake-proof and all that, wind-proof and all that, so we get some pretty good winds coming up that valley there. And, you know, it can gust up to 50, 60 miles. Well, we blew the doors out on the building there this year overnight in a big windstorm, so, and had to replace, I think they replaced all three of them.
In the prior instance where we had to haul, we received a notice of violation, is that correct?
Well,
we were hauling, it was through when Jim McCargy was here, and we were hauling to prevent hitting the freeboard, and I think they penalized us.
Well,
because we
right,
were-
they did give, and we're in violation now. Well, as soon as we go above they haven't formally issued a notice of violation, but we are in violation of our WP.
But probably everybody's
Yeah,
most
right.
likely in violation.
So interestingly enough, I discovered when I was in Plymouth that we had that 1 year when we redid the sewer fields and redid the reservoir out there. And we used a bunch of, the state wanted us to berm around the entire site, so we excavated another 4,000 cubic yards of material out of the reservoir, got another 15 or 20 acre feet, I forget how many acre feet, but in that, and then the following year, we worked all the way through the winter. That was the winter we didn't have the rain, same winter we had the problem out here. And then the following year, we got the 1,000-year event, and that reservoir went from being completely empty all the way to the top of the spillway. And if we hadn't excavated that additional 40 acre feet of dirt out of there, we would have spilled that water down Old Sacramento Road. It would have just gone right down the spillway and out down the creek and Old Sacramento Road. But because it's a quote-unquote 100, and now they say 1,000-year event, even though you may be in violation, if the event is classified as that, there's no monetary penalty. Now, that's part of the state code. So even though there's no bonus to that other than you're not paying a bunch of money if you have those problems associated with spilling a bunch of water like that, there at least is no physical fine to doing that. So this year would have been classified as one of those events, 100-year plus event, all the water we got. So fortunately, we didn't get the amount of rain that was around us. So we were able to handle it all and deal with it.
I thank you. Any any comment from the public? Zoom? Okay, back to the board.
I'll make a motion to approve staff's recommendation to authorize the emergency pumping and not to exceed additional pumping not to exceed $75,000.
I'll second that.
Okay.
But you said you may be coming back to us for additional requests?
No, I don't anticipate that we would have additional requests.
If we start with the evaporation, we should be fine?
We should be fine. Right now, we're at about 18 to 20 inches of freeboard. We're still putting in water from the groundwater extraction trench. There's still a lot of water going underground, and we capture underground water in that groundwater extraction trench. That has slowed off. We anticipate it'll drop off significantly at some point here. It hasn't yet, but hopefully it does soon. And the evaporator we have has the capacity to evaporate much more water than the old system. Significantly more, like about 4 to 5 times as much. So even if we get more water in there, we should be able to evaporate it off before our statutory limitation.
Okay, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, 5-0. Thank you very much, sir, kind sir.
Thank you, appreciate it.
And we're on to 5F, review and possible approval of the April 11th Board of Supervisor meeting minutes.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Now we're on to 5G. State Senate Bill 754, Discussion of possible action relative to the approval of the chairman's signature of a letter in support of subject legislation as it relates to the California High Cost Fund for Rural County Telephone Companies. Yes, Jeff?
All right, Chairman, Supervisors.
Morning.
Morning.
Go ahead.
All right, so these rural community telcos, there's 7 of them in the state that receive benefit from that high-cost fund. And what it really comes down to is, I think they stated it really good in Volcano's comments, that's 2 miles of fiber ran through LA, might be servicing tens of thousands of customers. 2 miles of fiber service underground here in Amador County in our upcountry might be serving a few customers. So economies to scale really comes into play. It's really not an attractive financial model for a small telco to be deploying fiber underground to reach these rural communities. And that's where that high-cost fund really comes into play. It is part of that backfill. It gets into the whole, the rates that the CPUC has leverage over, how they set those rates. Part of the change with what's taking place is that broadband used to, or the revenues from broadband on these telcos used to not be part of that calculation. The CPUC change in 2021 brought broadband revenues into that calculation. Ultimately, the result of that is it reduces the funding that those small telcos would receive from that high-cost fund, because they're using the broadband revenues as part of meeting what their requirements would be in order for that the high-cost funding to kick in. So it does reduce the funding that those small telcos get. Volcano is one of those telcos in the state. And what this bill is it's clarifying some of the definitions, and it is removing the broadband revenues from that calculation. So ultimately what it does in the end is it increases the amount of funding available to those small telcos when broadband revenues are removed.
Any questions from the board?
Nope, looks like probably necessary legislation if you want to try to help keep Volcano alive.
I have one of the standard phone line bills here. It is an AT&T bill, and what I was doing is looking at bills to see where this fund is actually being paid from, right? Because it is hitting ratepayers. And this is a regular phone bill for the airport, and we have the high cost surcharge in there at 12 cents. And so on a typical bill, I think we can see on normally it would be about 12 cents. On some of the other bills that we have for our larger facilities, it is a little bit more, but it's a pretty small fee on each of our bills. It's good to see that come back to the community.
Okay.
Yeah, I think without this, they're gonna have a hard time really upgrading the lines, you know, as far as their capabilities.
That's the only comment I had, is it's counterproductive to what we've been doing with broadband the whole time. Yeah. So, in our upcountry, our service provider is Volcano, so I see no reason why we wouldn't support this. It didn't make a lot of sense, but that's why we're here, to make sure that you guys are in support of it and okay with it, even though it will directly benefit somebody like Volcano.
And ultimately, it's the community members that are receiving that service.
Right.
Keeps their bill, the members, or the customer's bill down, ultimately.
Anybody on Zoom? Okay.
I would move that Board of Supervisors support Senate Bill 754 from Senator Alvarado Gil, and send a letter to that effect.
Okay.
Thank you, Supervisors.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, 5-0 again. And the meeting is adjourned until Tuesday, May 9th. Thank you very much.